Hi everybody. In this video I want to be talking about Git and just kind of covering the basics. I'm not going to go dive deep into the everything you need to know in order to do well, but at least it'll get you started. And I think most of you already know this, but it doesn't hurt to repeat and get everyone on the same page. And what I think about Git is that it kind of is a preventative from having that really sinking feeling in your stomach. I've had this a bunch of times in my life where you accidentally have deleted a bunch of files from your directory and you have to call the IT guys to restore your files from those tape cassettes. That's really painful and embarrassing, and you do get that sinking feeling like, oh God, what did I do? I wish I could hit undone here. Or other times in my life where I've been editing, I start off in the morning and want to improve a particular file, and it just gets worse and worse as the day progresses. And I feel like, wow, it would really be nice if I could just go back, unwind, and get to that original code. But I mucked up the code so badly, and I don't remember what changes I made, so there's no way of undoing it. So avoiding headaches like that really is kind of the heart of Git. It just really helps in software development. It's a major leap forward. There have been previous types of versioning systems other than Git. So when I worked at IBM, we used a versioning system, but it was kind of kludgy in that only one person could check out a file, and no one else could modify that file until that person checked the file back in. So it would lead to headaches like this, where you check out a file, you'd forget to commit it, you'd go home, and you'd get a call in the middle of the night saying, can you please come back into work to commit the file because it's holding other people up. So Git solves both types of headaches in a way, the not versioning or not saving files at all, or it fixes some of the problems with the old versioning systems. And here's my take on avoiding suffering. Take it with a grain of salt. It's what I do, but maybe it'll be helpful. So on my laptop, I have code that I don't mind losing. So if I'm exploring a particular algorithm and it's not a big deal, I wouldn't if my laptop got stolen, I wouldn't be depressed over it. I would keep stuff there. The next level is sticking stuff on Dropbox, and that's code I want to keep and that I'm kind of currently working on, but it's not critical. But it's taken sort of a long time, let's say, to develop that code. And let me get a folder here. That's GS350. There's my Dropbox folder. I don't have a lot of code anymore in Dropbox. It's a lot of it. It's a little bit in this code folder and other folders. But here's an example where I've been working on trying to figure out how to do kind of an elegant way of doing matrix factorization in Python, and I figured it out. This code is really kludgy. The idea is good, but it's just kind of my notes sort of on it. And so I keep it here. So it's code that it took me so long to figure out. I don't want to lose it. And what Dropbox does, is probably a lot of you know, is that whenever I save something, I don't have to do a commit or anything like that. It automatically saves it to the cloud. There's some ability to go back to previous versions, which is nice. And multiple people can work on the file. So if I'm working on a project with my son, for example, he can edit a file and I immediately get those changes without any, having to do any fancy Git stuff. So it's sort of a nice intermediate stage. So I'm not promoting Git for everything, although maybe some people would, but I certainly don't. And a lot of developers I know, use Dropbox, and I mean, not for everything, but for putzing around, Dropbox is a fine option here. And finally, the GitHub, GitLab, those repositories in the cloud sort of thing. So every paid job I have, so if I'm doing some freelance sort of programming work over the summer or whatever, I'm stashing that code on in some repository. Code I'm sharing with people, so code I'm sharing for this class, so a lot of code you're going to be cloning from my repositories. And let me just give you kind of an example of that, if I may. So here is in my book, A Programming Guide to Data Mining, I have all the code in a repository there, and so the code for each chapter. So chapter 6 here, this naive Bayes density function. So it's just a way of sharing code with people, and better than stashing it somewhere, because if I make a change and commit it, then other people can get that update pretty quickly, rather than trying to figure out, well, which version is which or something. So it's kind of a nice way to do stuff there. And code that I may not be sharing, but I just want to make sure I have it because, I'm working something out or trying to figure out a way of doing it. So if I'm working on a book or some explanation, I keep that code in a GitHub repository. And just a reminder that Dropbox and Git really don't mix well. So I never, and it's not just me that says this, but a number of people, where you shouldn't have a directory that is associated with a Git repository in your Dropbox folder. All right, so that's kind of the high level stuff. Let's just dive a little bit deeper here. I think that's on this page. And here's my little diagram of that. So we start off here. So this is a kind of the Git flow. You probably have seen it fine in other classes. But here we start off. And if I have some files in a directory, the first thing I would do to get started is this command git init. Right, so that initializes a repository in that particular directory. And then let's say I have a bunch of files here in untracked. So there are in the directory already. They're considered untracked. I didn't stick them in the repository. In order to do that, it's kind of a two-step process here. The first step, I go from untracked into this staging area. And to do that, I do this git add. So I can git add a file. The argument is what file to add. That puts a file into the staging area. I can do more than one file if I so choose. Then I can put a bunch there. It's this stage kind of intermediate step. Then in order to commit them or stick them in this unmodified, put them in the repository, I do the command git commit. Okay, that goes from stage to unmodified. And so that's great. Now the files I have that I'm working on and the files in the repository, they're identical. There's no difference among them. But then I go ahead and edit some files. So I edit a file. And now that file is considered modified. It's no longer matches what's in the repository. To get this change into the repository is, again, another two-step process. I do a git add here. That sticks it in the staged area, and then I commit that change back to unmodified. Here what I do frequently is I git add. If I've made a number of changes to a number of files, I'll take a look at each file to make sure it's the one I want to commit. I do a git add on that file. I again look at the next file, do a git add on that one. I don't like doing adding everything all at once. It might lead to problems where I end up committing a executable that instead of the source files or something. So I really pay attention here in this git add. So all this from here on down, all the blue stuff we've been talking about, that's on your local computer. So if you do a git commit, that commits it to a repository on your laptop. It doesn't go off to the cloud. This little green area here is where you're using something like GitHub or GitLab. And so we have things here, and now we want to stick it into one of these services. Or if you're working for a company, they may have their own system. So one thing we often do, or the first thing a lot of people do, is that's not going to there. Let's say it's going off to some other directory on your computer. That would be, you'd be cloning something that already exists. So that would be git clone. Takes a copy of what's in on GitHub, brings it in onto your local machine. Here I've created files on my own, on my local machine. I want to put them into GitHub, so I want to go in this direction. And that's git push. Taking stuff that I've already done, sticking it off into GitHub or GitLab. The other let's say here, before I get into that, let's say lots of people are contributing to this project. So you're working on a team project for a software engineering class, and you have Anne here making changes and Ben, and they're all pushing changes to this repository. So even before you do this push, you want to get those changes that other people made, and that's a git pull. So you pull those changes in, test your new code with what changes they made. It all works good. Then you push your code to that remote origin. So that's sort of in a nutshell, kind of the flow of how things work. So let's go on and kind of do a quick run through of how that works in practice. And let me just get to my, so here I am. Let me change to my Vagrant CS350. So I'm on my local machine on my Mac. It's not in a virtual machine. And let me make a directory that I'm going to use for my Git example. So I made this directory color and I changed into it. And let me create a file. Sweet. All right. Okay, and let me just save it as something here. Let me save it back to where it was. Vagrant boxes. Again, this is on my, just going to do this on my local machine. All right, so I'm going to save it there, and I want to save it as color HTML. Why not? All right. All right, this is going to be a really tiny file just to illustrate stuff. All right. Let me just do like a Git repo example. All right, that looks good. All right, let me just make sure I have it where I think it is. All right, and let's just look at it real quick. Let me use my Finder to do that. That's the easiest. All right. All right, here it is, color HTML. And nothing too exciting, a pink background with Git repo example. That was my code, and I'm sticking with it. All right, so let's see how we can make a Git repository. So the first thing we do is git init. And it says initialize an empty repository. Cool. And I can always do this git status to see what's happening. And it says, hey, you have a file in the directory that isn't in the repository. It's called color.html. So the first step I can do is git add color.html. And now if I do git status, I get that new file color.html is there. It's changes to be committed, so I can remove it from the stage if I made a mistake. That's kind of one nice thing about having a multi-stage thing here. And I can commit it. All right, and let's do a git status. Whoops. Okay, so everything's working good, looking good. All right, and let me make a change to that file. I think that was here. I'll change the heading. I'll say my Git repo example. Just make sure that works. So that looks like that. And now if I do git status, it says I modified it. All right, let me add this. All right, so now everything's up to date. And I want to show you one thing, and let me get back if I can. This is kind of, get back to my drawing program here. And let me create a new one right quick. Sorry for the delay here. All right, so here's what's happening. So here I have, let me get my, I'll stick with red just to make it fast. All right, so here I have a directory, and I've committed it. And I go along and I'm editing files, and I make another change. So this is all my files at one state. Here's the previous state. And you remember I can go back and get these files. These are saved. And here, I go and make another more changes and commit them. So I'm kind of making this little graph of these changes, right? So this is the state of the files at this time, and now here's another change, and here's another change, and so on. So it's kind of creating this line of what the state of the files is during each commit. One thing I can do is I can label one of these places on my little line. So I can call this like the beta version, or I can call it release 1. And even though I've made changes over here and changed my whole layout, I can always go back to beta and have a look at what that looked like. Or I can say, hey people, download this beta 1, and I can still be working and committing a new version. And then I can, what these are called I'm calling it tags. And so I can always tag another. I can say beta 2 or whatever. So I can create tags, and that allows me to keep working and bounce back. What did beta look like, and how does the current version compare to that? I can kind of look things around. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you. So let me show you how that works. There's various types of tags. There's like lightweight tags. I can just, but let me show you the one version I just started using, and that's git tag. And I give it what the name I want for the tag. I'll call this R1. I can call it rudiment 1. So because we're doing rudiments in the class, I'll call it rudiment 1. And then I can put a note. My code for the first rudiment. Okay, so what I did, if I go back here, is just, I'm kind of here in my development phase, and I marked this rudiment 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a change. I'm going to keep developing. So I kind of plop down a title here, but now I want to go and make some change. And let's say I'm going to, these are trivial changes, but illustrate. And let me commit that change. I'm going to show you git status. I've modified that file. Git add color. Git commit. All right. So now here's the situation. Let me get my little graph. So I've been working on my color folder. I've made a commit here, and I called it, did I call it rudiment 1? I think I didn't. And remember, that had the pink background. And then I continued here and made a change. I changed it to orange. What the heck, I'll use orange here. So this is, well, that was great. It didn't really, I guess that's not a very good orange. But okay, so I made a change here. So I have one state, and this most recent spot we're in is called master. That's the other thing I guess we need to know. I guess that is a little orangey. So let me show you what that looks like. So I made the commit, and I've made an earlier tag called rudiment 1 here somewhere. I'm sure that's, to find out what my tags are, I can just say git tag. I made a tag called rudiment 1, and I can even get information about that tag. Git show, if I can spell, rudiment 1. It'll give me all the information about it. Who did it, that I changed the title, my code for the first rudiment. So it gives me all sorts of information about that particular tag. All right, so now I'm in the master, and it's orange. I wish I had a better orange here. Let me see if I can get it brighter. Yeah, I'm really suck at getting a good orange. All right, anyway, so okay, so here I am at the master. Here I am at the pink rudiment. So much for my color abilities. All right, so let's see what we have. All right, so I'm going to go to the Chrome here. Orange. So, okay, that's the most recent change I made. I made it orange. But I can always go back to my rudiment 1. I can do that by git checkout rudiment 1. So now the code, if I do a cat on that color, you see it's pink. It made the change. And it is pink. And if I do the checkout of the master, the most recent change, and if I do that same, you see it's orange. So we're going to be using this in class, so I'm going to ask you at certain times to, when you're done with a certain rudiment or a certain stage of your code, to tag it so we can go and take a look at it, and I can look at it, and you can continue work on the next part of your code. So it's just an important part to know. All right, so I think I showed you everything you need to know about kind of that blue part of that diagram. Now let me show you how to connect it all up to GitLab, which is what we're going to be using in the class. All right, so let me do that. So let me go here and and let me back up to my general GitLab. Let me get there. All right, and I already started one here, but let me say I wanted to create a new project, and I want to call it CS350 test. I don't know, my short test. And I want it to be a private repository. All right, cool. And here's various instructions that we will need. So you can go ahead and do these now. Let me just do those. I've already done them, but it doesn't hurt to do them again. And I'm going to do this in my virtual machine. You can either do it on either, if you're using Vagrant, for example, you can do it in either on the host machine, like your laptop directly, or on the virtual machine. I have my laptop already set up for this, so I thought this would make a slightly better example. All right, now we need to create what are called SSH keys. Now you may already have those. So for me here again, I'm on the Mac part. So if I look at my .ssh directory, you see that I have various. I have an SSH key, a public key. These are these things here, the ID RSA. So let me show you how to generate them, because I don't have that here. I don't have, well, I do have a .ssh, but if I look at what's in it, it doesn't have those files. So if you don't know how to do it, and you don't have them already, like I do on my Mac, here's what you need to know. It's actually fairly easy to do. It tells you how to do it. So here you go under Profile Settings in GitLab, and here's this little thing called SSH keys. And here you're going to paste your SSH key, but interestingly enough, you don't have one yet. How do you do that? Well, it says here's how you generate it. And just wait, there it is, SSH key gen. So that's the command you would use to do it. Let me go ahead and do it. So I just used the default there, and you don't need this, but I put it in anyway. All right, and now if I look, I now have those files. It's the contents of this file that you're going to paste into GitLab. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll just do this. Okay, and then you grab all this, copy it, hopefully, and now the guts here. Okay, and I'll just do Vagrant box. Okay, so that was the SSH key part we needed. All right, so let me zoom back here to the other instructions. All right, so here I already have an existing folder, a Git repository, so it tells me everything I need to do. So let me go through that example. And here, suppose I already have, a file here. And let me go to my Vagrant, or a directory. So here I have some code. It's called RC Club. Let me change into that directory. Start off my server. Okay, copy that. I'm just going to show you it just to put some. And it's a little sample, nothing wonderful, just kind of a sample of a little Python server. So let's say I want to put that in version control on GitLab. So stop the server, and the instructions were to do a git init. Okay, initialize an empty repository. Let me get those instructions up. So we did that. Git remote add. Let me try that part. Git add everything. I mentioned before that was sort of risky, but we're going to do it the first time. Well, I can. Okay. And now I can push it to the cloud. Whoops, did I may have missed. No, that looked good. Okay, so now it pushed all the changes I made that I committed locally on my desktop, or on my laptop rather, off to GitLab. And let's see if we can take a look at those. Okay, first commit looked good. And there's all the code I just did. Server PY. Looks good. So that is an example of committing to the cloud. Now let's say, just for completeness sake here, let me stick it somewhere. Let me change directory. I don't know if I have a temp directory or not. Oh yeah, I do have a bunch. All right, so let me make directory. Let's just do it here. So I can clone this repository. Let's say I'm sticking it on Google Cloud somewhere. I just wanted to show that rather than in some further video. All right, so it has all the code here. So let's say I want to clone this repository. So I go under project here to get the link, and that's the link I'm going to use. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard. I think I was already kind of starting that here. So now I'm on the Mac side. I'm not in just because there's nothing much in there, but I'm going to do a git clone. Okay, and that grabbed all that information. Whoops, in CS350 test. So there it is. So I could put, for example, this code on IBM, or sorry, not on IBM, on Google Cloud. And this is one way I could pull it from the repository. All right, that's about all I wanted to show. I hope this was helpful in kind of understanding the basics. Oh, one other thing I should mention here. Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to show you, and that was by default, when you do a push, it doesn't push those tags. Like when we had rudiment 1 here, let me just do that. Git tag. Oh, I never tagged RC Club, sorry. So let's do that. Git rudiment 1, let's call that the same. Test. I'm keeping things short here, sorry. So now when I do the git tag here, by default, if I do git push, it's not going to push those. Everything is up to date. It didn't need to, it doesn't push tags by default. But if I go git push origin rudiment 1, so it pushes that tag. So when you just do git push, it doesn't push tags. You have to specify it to push the tag to the repository. So let's see if we can see. Oh, shoot. Sorry. I kind of closed that. All right. So the repository. So there, it shows that I pushed that tag. Let's do a few more things here just to wrap up. One is, so let me just look where I am here, and let's make a simple change to my code here. So let me go into my favorite editor, Sublime here, and open up some file. It doesn't matter which file. I'm going to go into that RC Club. Let's just modify that server in some stupid way here. Starting server. I don't know. So that's, and let me just make it Python 2.7 and 3 compatible here. All right, so I changed it. It doesn't really do anything. It just adds a print statement, but it's just I modified the file. Right, so git status. All right, so I modified server py. Let me add that. Okay, so now I'm okay, and it actually tells me to git push to publish it. So I modified it, and now I want to push it off to get to the repository or to GitLab. Okay, so now I showed you kind of how to go from when you make changes, you just commit them and you just push them. So that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. And I can look at the tag here and I can switch back and forth. Remember, by going git checkout, I'm not going to demo this because I already have, but I can go git checkout rudiment 1 and git checkout master. So that's just a review, but that just shows you kind of the basics. And one thing I forgot to mention, and this was definitely the final thing, is how to add people to your project. And you'll be doing this when you're working in a team, and also you'll be adding me and the lab aide to your private project, so we can see how you're progressing on the various rudiments. And to do that, let me just show you how that works. So here I'm in my repository that I created, the CS350 test. And I'm going to do members here, and I can add a new member. So let me do that. I can add Fiona Elbron. That's the person I want to add. So here's where you'd add my name if I'm, and the one I would like would be a reporter that allows me to actually download and examine your code. If you want me to have access denied after a certain date, you can add that. But other than that, you can add me to a project. So that's that. So I've added, and you might add another, or the lab aide here, or if you're working on a project, you would add that person as a developer. So that's one additional task that you'll need to be aware of. Thanks. So the final thing I want to leave you with is what the workflow might look like. And it's after this, that after the end of a work session, so if you've worked for a couple hours, it's a good idea to commit locally, to keep your changes, to do that git commit to your local repository. So if you work for a few hours, do it. At the end of the day, definitely do it. And the next, whether when you're trying to push to the GitLab or GitHub, that kind of depends a bit on what if you're working as part of a group. So that means that you have stuff in the repository, and when you begin your day, you're going to pull that repository and grab the changes people made. So before you start your work session, you probably want to do a git pull, grab the changes your other teammates did, and before you begin your work. And you would push if your code isn't going to break anything. So you've done that pull, checked your new code changes, nothing's breaking, and you're adding some complete feature here, not just a halfway feature. You're going to push that to your repository so your other teammates can grab it. And if you're working just individually, it's pretty much the same as this group one, that you're not really breaking anything and you're adding a feature. Go ahead and commit it to the GitHub or GitLab repository. And if you're using that Git repository to also populate a production server, make sure you don't want to break that production server. So you want to only pull from a stable tag when you tag it. Nothing's worse than, and I've had this experience as well, that you are introducing a new feature into the build and you create a build break. This is really especially when you're kind of crunching to get reach some deadline, and you can't even build your project anymore because someone committed something that creates significant problems. But that's the general workflow I do. So every work session you commit locally, and you only push out when you have a complete feature. I'm hoping that's helpful. So that's kind of it. It's longer than I thought it would be, which is true of most of these videos. But at least I'm hoping it kind of gets you started, kind of orients you on how Git works, because we're going to be using it pretty much from week 1 of the course to the last week of the course. And so and from your life beyond the course, everything in the developer world seems to revolve around Git. There are other ones, Mercurial, which I like a little better, but I've kind of abandoned because I started getting confused between the two, and a lot of people don't use it. So, Git's pretty much the way to go. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you in the next video. Bye.